Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Circular Fashion Festival, Fashion and the Circular Economy Instagram Live panel. We have had an excellent morning so far. We've had 3 great speakers, and we've got 2 more coming up this afternoon. So coming in shortly, we will have the Fashion History Museum joining us to talk about their role in the circular fashion industry and what circular fashion means to them. So we're super excited to be sharing that time with them and to be sharing these videos with all of you. If you're able to watch live, the conversations tend to last between 15 minutes to a half an hour. I have got my phone plugged in this time, so hopefully we won't be cut short like we were with our previous conversation with Brooke from Secondhand Sustainability. But we're just so excited to have everybody here and to be doing these live stream series as a way of reaching people virtually who may not be able to attend some of our in-person events. But we do have a number of events coming up this week that you can find in the link in our bio on our Eventbrite. We've got everything posted there. A couple of our events have sold out and have quite extensive wait lists at this point. But we do have a virtual event this Thursday with Ryan Proser from the U of G to talk about the impact of microplastics in fashion, as well as the Upcycled Dinner this Friday in support of the Helper Bees program at the Church of the Apostles. And on Saturday, the event that everybody's been talking about, the clothing swap, where we have collected over 5,000 pieces of clothing. And we do have some capacity to take more donations in. So we are accepting donations up until this Thursday during regular hours. So you can drop your items off at the Tool Library from 4 to 7 on Tuesday or Thursday, or from 1:30 to 6 on Wednesday. And now I'm going to welcome in the Fashion History Museum, and we'll be joined by them in just a moment. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me today.
We're really excited to have you here to talk about your role at the Fashion History Museum. So I'll launch right into things and let you introduce yourself and explain what your role is there.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Rachel Bailing, and I am the outreach and program person at the Fashion History Museum in Hespeler, Ontario. We are located in the old post office, right on the main street on Queen Street in Cambridge.
Excellent. And how is that part of the sustainable or circular fashion economy?
So we're in a very interesting part of sustainable fashion in that we are looking for very specific things to become part of our collection. We never know what's going to come our way. We welcome donations from various collectors. It could be somebody with 1,000 items or somebody with just 1 item. Everything has a story. Everything has a history. We are so interested in the execution of various materials, textiles. We're interested in the stories behind those pieces, behind the designers of those pieces. Anything that the museum does not take for its collection, we make sure that it gets a new home. And that could be in various sales that we take part in. We also have many different connections with people who actually utilize different pieces to rework them. So we kind of feel like we're a hub for many different things, many different conversations within the community.
Absolutely. And how did you get into this industry?
Wow. I think it probably started since I was a little girl. I always loved dressing up. So always having an imagination and making, a wedding veil into a fairy dress or, pretending that I was something. I've also got a theater background. So, I would look at a certain piece and I would think of a script that piece would look great on stage. And then from there, I started my own vintage clothing shop. in 2014. So that's how I became friends of the museum, and my daughter was a volunteer there, and it's just kind of grown. Anybody who loves fashion really finds their people, their community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know that we're certainly birds of a feather. And when we met to have a 15-minute conversation, it turned into 2 hours. So we will try not to keep everybody here for 2 hours, but I did plug in my phone, so hopefully my battery life won't drop during this conversation. From the sort of perspective of the Fashion History Museum, how did that come about, and how was it sort of benchmarked as something that, you know, we needed or wanted as part of our community?
Well, I think the world has taken notice of fashion within the past century or so. It's not something that's frivolous. It's something that we all put something on every day to walk outside of our doors. We all keep things in our closets that are meaningful to us or to the people that we love. And I think we as a museum have definitely watched the trends, not only from a design aspect, from a story aspect, but also that we do see these styles. It's circular, right?
Yes.
We get inspiration from the past, and that's going to continue. But it's also something that I guess if you look at Hollywood, look at the Met Gala. The Met Gala has been such a prominent force in history, fashion history. And it's not just our museum, it's various museums all over the world that are taking note of that and utilizing that in terms of exhibitions. I think it's really, I think it's something that you know, has definitely built over the last century, but it's going to continue to be a part of that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that there's been a shift in how people are interacting with vintage fashion, or even what vintage means to most people?
That's a conversation that it's quite funny. Actually, people say, so what is it to you? And it depends on what vintage you are. What vintage? So for me, vintage is anything 1970s or before. But I can see that the trend now, vintage is 80s and 90s, even into the 2000s. So it just depends on, in particular, a vintage clothier, someone like myself, my other hat. It's dependent on what people are looking for when they come into your store. So just because it's vintage, you're still a brand. You're still branding yourself, and you want to bring in those clients who love what you love.
And I think the speed of the fashion cycle has also impacted how quickly we're now starting to recycle trends, that soon it's going to be, you know, the 2010s coming back, because we're moving through that fashion cycle at breakneck speed. But what's kind of interesting, existing in a modern era that shares so many styles, it creates this uniqueness in the vintage industry that you can be just a seller of 80s goods or a curator of 80s goods, or 90s or any era or a mix of eras. And so that's a really interesting thing that the Fashion History Museum is able to do, is present these collections.
Right. And I think what's really interesting is a museum does look at trends. They look at what people outside of their doors are wearing, or what they're interested in. If you're interested in eyewear, for instance, we're right now we have an exhibit on eyewear, and it's amazing what and again, you see those trends and you see it coming back. And I think the whole wonderful thing about fashion, especially right now, is there are no rules.
Yes.
It's not dictated by the monarchy anymore. It's not dictated by one particular designer or designers. You can look in your own wardrobe and create your own style. And I love that, you know, there are so many different things. I mean, we've talked about that we could talk for hours about different sales we could have, or different exhibits that we can have. And again, it's very much something that's it's personal to each and every one of us, which I think is what the draw is.
Certainly. What are some myths and misconceptions that come up, especially as it ties to vintage curating of fashion and collecting of fashion?
I think from a vintage standpoint, everything is small. Everything is you know, what is a size 0? Does that even exist? No. I don't think that's true. I do think that if you want to wear sustainable fashion, vintage fashion, you can find it. Even if it's something that you can rework. For instance, just to give you an example, wedding apparel. Yes, a lot of vintage wedding gowns are smaller, but we have wonderful people at our fingertips, particularly within the Guelph community, who can look at a piece and say, we don't have to ruin the integrity of this 1920s, 30s gown. We can make it fit without ruining it and rework it. And I think it's really magical when we see someone fall in love with something. The sky is the limit in terms of how we can change the size without actually altering the look. So I think the perception is it's only for women. No, it's not only for women. It's for men. It's for children, pets, for goodness sake. We can make things out of vintage fabric for our pets now. Yes. So I think the more we talk about it, the more we make that just part of our everyday world. That's where it's at right now.
I love that. And that helps create a more accessible way into the vintage fashion world, and that it's not necessarily about maintaining the identical integrity of every single vintage piece that's ever existed. It's about finding a way to make it a part of the world that we're currently in and the world that we're moving into.
Right, exactly. It's looking at it through a new lens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that. Cool. Well, what does a circular fashion economy look like to you?
Well, from a vintage clothing standpoint, I mean, it's just going to continue. It's going to continue. I can't remember who it was because I've been listening to a few other people speaking today, but it's definitely, somebody had said something about it's not just once now. It's 4 times something can be, you know, recycled because it looks different. The same hoodie, for instance, looks different on every single person, or they'll style it a different way. I think that's amazing. I also think one of the conversations that can happen, and it does happen at the museum level, is what do I do with this? I have 3 closets of my great-great-grandmother's, my great-grandmother's, my grandmother's, and my mother's things. What do I do with that? And there are people now, that is their livelihood, that they can come in and help you literally go through those closets, either styling you or helping you understand how to actually gift that or sell that to the right person. There are people who will be interested. I think there is that misconception that people think, okay, we just have to throw it away, whether they have to sell the house. It's very important to get people to come in to help you. And there are people who can do that. They can call the museum. They can call a vintage dealer. They can call the Guelph Tool Library.
Yes.
And there's an amazing place called Gina's Closet. It is in St. Jacobs, Ontario, for instance. And they take donations of wedding gowns and formal wear. And all of the proceeds goes to cancer charity within the region. That is a remarkable organization with heart, and it's so meaningful for the person who has gifted the item, but also the person who walks out with the item. And oftentimes that dress will come back, and it may be worn 4 different times, 4 different ways. I just think that's amazing, and I could go on forever about it. so many different places who that is their passion and that is what they can do to help.
And a project like that is so beautiful because it just adds to that narrative of pieces can continue, and really we are just stewarding them. You know, we're borrowing all of the things that we own. And so having places that we know that those things can go and they'll get to live on, whether it's through like a rental or a loan or something very circular like Gina's Closet. I think that's a really important message for people to take away, that you putting it in a box at the curb or at a thrift store, it's not the end of that thing. That thing's going to continue existing. So why not make sure that it's going somewhere that it'll be utilized and that its potential is maximized as much as possible.
That's why I love the idea of what you're doing with this festival. Mm-hmm. Is that narrative is being carried on in so many different ways. What better way than to have a collective of people together, mm-hmm. the same conversation, the same ideas, and we know where to go now. We know who to ask, and that it's amazing.
Making it easy, accessible, fun, something that people are going to enjoy interacting with. And being able to share the stories of organizations like yours and like the other folks that we've talked to this morning. I think that broadening this conversation and getting more people included is so important, because I think the term circular as it relates to fashion and other aspects of the economy is still so mm-hmm. new to a lot of people. Even though we may have been active participants in it for the last 30 years, you might not have thought of it that way. So having these conversations is such an important part of it. So thank you for being part of this conversation. We did have a question that was, what is your favorite fashion era based on history and positioning in the world?
It's hard to pick just one. If you saw my closet, you would know why. But my favorite right now, I really love 60s. I love the color. I love what was going on in the world in terms of like the fashion world. I think I just love color. I love textile. Mm-hmm. I love different patterns, and I love the shift dress. If anyone's getting into vintage, the shift dress looks great on all sizes. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a really nice way with a cute little turtleneck or a cardigan and tights, booties, you know, you can take that look right into now. So that's my long answer, 60s. Ask me tomorrow, it might be different.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of it, is that you don't have to tie yourself to one era. You know, when we have access to close to 100 years of styles, and there's even, you know, historical costumers who bring those elements into their everyday style, like the cottagecore trend, having like such further back vintage elements, but tied into something that makes you feel connected to now. It's a really interesting place to be at in the fashion cycle, because we have everything at our disposal.
We do. And the other aspect of this I really want to encourage is hand-me-downs or swaps within families, friendship groups, that sort of thing. I can see that changing. I can see mm-hmm. that we're kind of dispelling that myth that we have to gift it away from where we are. Everybody wears it differently. Think of a kilt. Mm-hmm. A kilt is worn traditionally with a blouse and very, very formal, but I've seen kilts with, you know, concert t-shirts and Doc Martens. So again, that same kilt worn by various individuals within your own circle, it's going to change. And I think that's, again, where we're going to be at the forefront. I think we're almost in a fashion revolution right now in terms of sustainability and circular fashion, in terms of trends and in terms of, you know, we're just getting away from so many things. It's like, forget about what to wear after 50. Wear what you want.
I've been thinking a lot about sort of fashion freedom
Yeah.
and not, you know, I remember growing up and shows like What Not to Wear saying, you know, this is your body type and this is how you have to dress for it. And that absolute removal of sort of personal style, personal connection, and personal desire. And so I've started really embracing a lot of oversized things and like bringing structure into garments in different ways because I've decided it's not worth trying to conceal my body or make my body look smaller for other people if I'm not wearing what I want to.
Exactly.
And
And,
so,
and you have no idea who you're inspiring while you do that.
mhm.
Think of a younger generation that's watching, how we present ourselves to the world with no
Mhm.
fear. How liberating is that? Um, you know, we're talking about so many rules getting thrown out the window. I'm
Mhm.
happy, but I mean, it's great to have that as part of history and how far we've come.
Yeah.
And I think about corsets, for instance.
Mhm.
Corsets are now being worn on the outside of clothes just as a fashion accessory. It's not
Yeah.
what it used to do, but it looks
No,
great. And
exactly.
I just love that. I love to see that happen. Footwear is so cool right now. And I mean, I could go, like I said, we could go on. Why not wear a prom dress to the grocery store? That's my biggest thing. I do that. It's
Yeah.
fun. It makes people smile.
Yeah. And that I think that changing the rules and basically saying we don't have to follow these guidelines. They're there if you want them. If these are the things that you want to embrace and that's what makes you happy, then like all the power to you. But we're not going to confine ourselves to, you know, apple shape, pear shape, hourglass. These are your colors. These are your structures. And it allows us to access so much more from vintage fashion when we allow ourselves to break those rules.
Right.
So I think that's a really beautiful thing and a really beautiful note to end on.
Yes.
It was lovely chatting with you as always. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing you Saturday.
Yes, and we look forward to seeing you and seeing anything you might be bringing.
Oh, that's great.
The Fashion History Museum will be joining us at the Swap on Saturday, along with our other community organizations. So we look forward to seeing folks there from 11 to 3 in Old Quebec Street Mall in downtown Guelph. Thank you for joining this conversation again, and have a great afternoon. Take care.
You too. Bye.